And Daniel chapter 10, when it was describing Yahweh Shah, is talking about his eyes were like a flame of fire, and down here on verse 15 is going to talk about his skin color, and it says, and his feet like unto brasses, as if they would burn in the furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. Okay, so again, that's basically describing a real austere so-called black man. If when the police are getting details on a robbery or something like that, they ask for a description. He was this tall, he was this dark, or he had a voice like this, an accent like that, a real deep voice. When you're talking on the phone to people, a lot of the times you could tell somebody's nationality just by hearing them on the telephone. So-called black people sound a certain way. So-called white people or Edomites sound a certain way on the telephone. So you can kind of pick it out by their voices. So they're giving us a description, basically like a police description. They're describing his hair, his color, what he sound like, things like that, giving us a description, a revelation, or to reveal. He's revealing to us, the depiction of somebody back in the day, because, it would have been easy to mess things up by just saying, oh, the Lord was a so-called black man, just verbatim like that, So they gave us all the descriptions. They did everything else but told us he was a so-called black man. They gave us all the descriptions. So even if you was to put this all in context and chart it out or whatever, you'd be like, there's nothing else he could have been but this, We're going to jump over to Exodus. This is talking about the description of Moses. Okay, this is Exodus chapter 4, verse 6. It says, and the Lord said, furthermore unto him, put now thy hand unto thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom. And when he took it out, behold, he was leprous as snow. So the Most High was basically meeting Moses. And, Moses, he was telling Moses, some things to come to pass. And, the Most High is basically showing himself that he is the Most High. And he's showing him the power that he has. So he tells Moses to put his hand upon his bosom. So, he put his hand on his chest. He put his hand upon his bosom. And then when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. So, I always used to like to say this, if a God was coming to me and he was trying to show me himself as to be some kind of power, and let's say I was, I had an Edomite skin color, I was so-called a white man, and he told me to put my hand into my chest and look back at it again, and if it was still white, be like, okay, nothing happened. But if I go from the complete end of one spectrum to the other spectrum, then there's a power working with you. And he says, and he said, put thy hand unto thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again and plucked it out of his bosom. And behold, it was turned again to his other flesh. So what is his other flesh? His natural flesh. So the Most High took his skin color from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum to show you, like, basically, I'm the creator. I created things from this far end to that far end. I can do it as I please. But moreover, what I'm trying to bring out to you all here is the color of Moses, okay? Moses was a so-called black man, and I believe Moses would have been from, he was from the tribe of Levi, which would have made him a so-called Haitian today, okay? My next precept. Okay, and this is Numbers chapter 12. All right. And I'm going to jump around just to get to the point. Okay, this is talking about Moses and his sister and his brother. And Miriam, Moses' sister, and Aaron, Moses' brother. Miriam and Moses spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married. For he had married an Ethiopian woman. So Moses married a woman from Ethiopia, and his brother and his sister basically was making fun of him, And I'm going to jump down to verse 10. And the cloud departed from off the tabernacle, and behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow. And Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. So the Most High had taken away the skin pigmentation, or the melanin, out of Miriam. She became leprous, white as snow, you know. Even, let's say, Jakes, if they was to burn themselves or cut themselves down to the so-called white meat, that would be leprous. They would be losing their melanin. And then when that skin grows back, start out as pink flesh, and then it grows back into its color. It gets its color back, But Miriam was turned leprous, white as snow. And verse 12, it says, hang on, let me go back up when I skipped the verse. Verse 11, and Aaron said unto Moses, Alas, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not the sin upon us, wherein we have done foolishly, and wherein we have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed, when he cometh out of his mother's womb. So, like, if you ever notice any baby, all babies pretty much when they're born, and with any and everything in your body, you start out with a little bit of melanin. Your skin doesn't quite have all the color. You might be born really, really light skin, and your eyes might be a really light color. For the most part, we all start out the same color, but as we progress in life, our melanin starts to gain inside of our body. So your skin color starts to develop, your eye color starts to develop, your hair color starts to develop. Scientifically, what's going on with these Edomites is they're just how do they say, they have a recessive traits, recessive genes. They're basically like their name, Esau. They're wasted away, they're lacking the melanin. They're not a whole human being, Okay, let me get to my next precept. Dealing back with Moses again. Okay, now this is talking about Moses when he was, if you all know the story about Moses, there was a point in time where the Pharaoh wanted to try to kill off some of the boys or some of the children of Israel because they were starting to multiply a little more than they. So I'll give you a little bit of context. This is Exodus chapter 1, verse 7. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. And there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph, and said unto his people, Behold, the children of Israel are more mightier than we. Come, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that where they falleth out any war, and join also unto our enemies, and fight against us, so that they may get up out of the land. So basically, the Pharaoh, it's basically, this is going into another lesson, but this is basically what's going on today. We're here in captivity here in Babylon, and whether you know it or not, this is the agenda. They keep you super busy at work. They keep you super busy trying to pay your bills. They keep you super busy trying to do everything so that you can't think for yourself, They keep you super occupied so that, for one, and also why they have Planned Parenthood, and they're killing us in all the ways with GMOs and all this extra stuff, hip-hop music, and they got us out here killing each other because they're afraid that we might multiply more than they and take over them. And if, we're not super busy, we might start thinking on our own. We might come back to our power. We might raise up against them. And we're really the golden chicken, the golden egg to Esau here in Babylon, because all of his riches come from the children of Israel. Like the Lord said, and thy seed shall bless all the nations of the earth. They holding us in captivity, and we built up this, we conquered the world for them. We plowed this earth for them. So, this is what the Pharaoh was planning to do. And so they basically instituted the first form of Planned Parenthood back in the day, and and so this is how Moses wound up getting put down in the stream. We'll jump over to chapter 2, and the chapter 2 verse 5. Exodus chapter 2 verse 5. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along the river side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she had saw a child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrew children." So the Pharaoh's daughter was down at the river stream, and they saw the child coming down inside the little ark, or he came down in a little basket. And they opened it up. She said, "This is one of the Hebrew children." So she knew immediately this was one of the Hebrew children. Okay, and now, the Most High said he did put a difference between I believe it was the Ethiopians and the children of Israel, and also the Egyptians. A dog wouldn't move his tongue against the Egyptians, basically saying that there's a difference between the Egyptians and the Israelites. Okay, and we're about to get into that a little bit, because the original Egyptians and the Israelites were the same color. Okay, and it says it says, verse 7, "Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, Take the child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child. And the child grew and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, Because I drew him out of the water. And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren and looked upon their burden. And he spotted an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So that's getting into something a little different. But I was just trying to bring out the point how Moses was found in the river. The Egyptian women, they knew that he was a child he was a Hebrew child. But however, as it goes on, he was raised as the Pharaoh's daughter's son. So he, for the people who didn't know, that wasn't behind the scenes, that didn't know, they would just look at it, think maybe it was the Pharaoh's daughter. They were the same color, everything was the same. Only the maidens, Pharaoh, his daughter, and Moses knew that he was not an Egyptian. Okay, so if Moses was an Edomite, okay, being raised as an Egyptian, it will cause a big controversy, because that's not your child. You don't look anything like your parents. This is still dealing in Egypt again. Like I said, because of Egypt, we look a lot like the Egyptians. Okay, the original Egyptians, not the people that's over there today. All right, and this is talking about Joseph. His brothers had sold him into Egypt, and time had went by, and Joseph was basically like Moses. He was raised high up into the Pharaoh's court, And then Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn from Egypt, but Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brothers, for he said, Least peradventure mischief fall upon him. Like, suppose something bad happened to my youngest son. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn from among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan, and Joseph was the governor over the land. And he it was that sold all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. So Joseph was basically like number 2 in Egypt. Okay? And his brothers came, they hadn't seen him for a while. They came down to Egypt to buy some food because of the famine. And Joseph saw his brothers, and he knew them. But he made himself stranger to them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From a land of Canaan, to buy food. And Joseph knew his brothers, but they knew him not.